All right, good morning. Thank you for joining us as you file in here. We'll give it just a minute for attendees to load in. Appreciate you joining us again this morning, today. Still have several attendees rolling in here, so we'll give it just a minute. As usual, we encourage questions. Please use the Zoom questions to submit your questions, and time permitting, we'll get to them or we'll get back to you with them. By all means, I think it's a great presentation this morning. Lots of useful information here. All right. Looks like we might be leveling out just a little bit, so let's go ahead and get started. Good morning. My name is Patrick Kelly. I'm with Digital Watchdog. Appreciate everybody joining this morning in our next edition of Works with DW Spectrum. So this morning we're lucky enough to be joined by Neil Heller. Neil's with Vigitron and their network solutions that are key and crucial to an IP video system. Neil, thank you for joining us this morning.
Patrick, thank you for having us.
All right, Neil. So let's go ahead and get started. Why don't you tell us about Vigitron, please?
Okay, if we could start with the next slide, please.
There we go.
There we go. This is going to be a little bit of a different type of presentation because it will include some references to product. Vigitron prides itself on our education as much as we do on our products and our support. And since our entrance into the IPPoE field, we've been very, very motivated and very active in the field of educating people as to the unique differences for networking and networking design of networks for security products, particularly emphasizing cameras as opposed to standard digital networks. So throughout the course of this, we're going to attempt to give you some of that information as to what these differences are and tell you where to go to get additional information on this, as well as how our products address this. And it's really the basis of it. So when we talk about Vigitron, we talk about it not only in terms of product, but in terms of support, network design, and education. Next slide, please. We really are into partnerships. Partnerships not only as we're talking about with Digital Watchdog, but also partnerships with you as a customer, you as a dealer. Next slide. Our emphasis, believe it or not, is not as much on product as it is for profitability. Everything that we do and every product that we design and every service we provide is designed to maintain profitability, particularly at that dealer level. Too often in the course of suggesting what products are going to be sold, we look at the price of the products without looking at what those products really cost to install and maintain. And oftentimes the cost of rolling that truck, the cost of service visits, eats up valuable profitability. So when we design our products, when we have our services, we do it in mind to maintain profitability at that dealer level and minimize losses. Next slide, please. A little bit of a history of Vigitron. We were established as a design house in 1993 and incorporated in 1997. So we've been around for quite some time. Our mission and our focus has always been in extended distance transmission. Obviously, in the early 1990s, the focus was on twisted pair, and we focused on creating products of twisted pair for video data and power over twisted pair cabling. To date, probably throughout the world, we have over 800,000 channels that we've sold into. About 12 years ago, along with the rest of the industry, we recognized the movement to IPPoE, and we started designing products for that environment. Our products are designed in the United States. We have two manufacturing facilities, one in the United States and one in China, and we have worldwide sales offices. Next slide. So what are the key points? Vigitron is an American company. Our products are designed, assembled, and tested in the United States. We have a long, stable history, and that's important because in the IPPOE environment, you have many of these fly-by-night companies that go in and out of business. And our products are well received and present in many, many high-level, very high-level applications in airports and government buildings throughout the world. So they're tested not only by us, but they're tested by very, very major engineering companies and adopted for their applications. Next slide. Vigitron has several engineering divisions. Obviously, the analog products is basically non-existent. Our IPPOE group, when we talk about OEM products, Vigitron does not OEM commercial products, but we design many modules that are contained within products that you are very familiar with. Maybe even you represent them. So companies come to us and they say, we need a special OEM design or module, and we do it. We do our own firmware and our own software. So these are all our engineering product groups. Next slide. We have a very interesting way in designing our product. We call it interoperational testing. You may be surprised to learn that IP and PoE, while they hold standards under IEEE, are not exactly standards. There's a wide berth in how they operate. And there are approximately 6 manufacturers of what we call PSE or PD chips that govern PoE throughout the world. They're all a little different. When you design them, those differences increase. When you put them in a network, those differences increase. So what we decided to do 12 years ago when we entered the market, we called upon the major manufacturers, at that time primarily IP cameras, and we said, send us your highest PoE camera, send us your highest bandwidth camera, and we designed products in order to emphasize the most reliable and the highest efficiency of transmitting those products over a network environment. And we kept that up for access control, wireless products, LED lighting. So we get so many products from these manufacturers, and you'd be surprised at the differences that they require in order to maintain reliable operation. And we design our products to meet that high berth. A little bit of a side story, but I'm not going to mention names. But there was a major customer. If I said the name again, you would know it, immediately. They decided to convert their operations, their security operations, from analog to IP. They had a certain brand of network switches. They started installing them and they started failing. That switch manufacturer asked the camera manufacturer, another very well-known brand, to send them the cameras, and they issued a report and said, well, they're not to standard. Well, of course, that got a laugh out of the camera manufacturers who said, if we're not standard, nobody else is. Tested our products, our network switches, because again, we have to build it to this wide berth of variations. 1,300 switches for Vigitron. So again, that's why interoperative testing when we design our products is so valuable to you as far as reliability and again, to achieve that profitability. Next slide, please. We deal only in physical transmission, UTP cable, coax, fiber, and single pair. Next slide. Okay. One of the great things about our industry is that our industry is always at the top of changes, but many, many times those changes supersede and become faster than the ability to deal with those changes. And I'm talking about specifically bandwidth and PoE, and again, with network cameras. Next slide. Next slide, please. So what has happened, and these are recent changes just over the last year and a half. Well, from a bandwidth and packet handling environment, many of the cameras out there have gone from 100 megabps ports to 1G ports. That causes a chain reaction. And what happens there is where if I had a 100 megabps camera, I would be okay with a 1G backbone. But when exceed that and go to 1G, now I'm talking about a 10G backbone. The next change has been the adoption finally of a standard of 802.3 BT, which enables up to 90 watts per port. You may say that's great. And this has been a constant problem in our industry, where camera manufacturers in particular have demanded more and more and more power and exceeded that of the ability to provide that power. Well, 802.3 BT addresses that problem though. When we went from 30-watt sources to 60-watt sources, the camera industry couldn't wait around. And they created all sorts of other environments that they put in hundreds of thousands of cameras until 802.3 BT came about. Guess what? BT is incompatible with those sources. So now we have two problems, and we get tons of technical phone calls every single day, even unrelated to our products where manufacturers just refer us. What are the two problems we get? I have a network and I can't see my cameras, or I saw my cameras and I can't see it now. Packet losses, bandwidth restrictions. I got a PoE source, my camera says it needs 60 watts. I have a 60-watt source and it isn't working. Why? Incompatibility, because my camera is BT. You can see how confusing all of these things have become, and why education now is really the heart of what saves profitability at the dealer level and is at the heart of Vigitron. Next slide, please. So let's just look at the situation with PoE. When we started out, we were 802.3 AF, 15-watt source, 12.95 at the cameras. I don't want to really dwell on this. We then integrated to 30-watt source at 802.3 AT. But then the industry couldn't wait around. And 3 non-standards developed. They were really all the same. And the most popular one became something called Upoe, which was actually developed by Cisco. And what Upoe did, it was actually 802.3 AT times 2. Now, again, we get into depth about this in our seminar on PoE, so I'm not going to do it here. But it was a very defined methodology that camera manufacturers adopted, such as Access. Anybody who was over 30 watts adopted this. Well, lo and behold, about a year and a half ago, here comes 802.3 BT. Guess what? Incompatible with Upoe. And now you can see where the confusion and the problems start. Next slide, please. So I talked about interoperational testing. Well, 12 years ago, the first products we came out with were extenders. We knew that marketplace. We knew that marketplace from Twisted Pair. As we started testing cameras, and again, we're not testing them for performance, we're testing them for integration with a network, we were inundated by all the major camera manufacturers. Now, why did they do that? Because they were getting tons of returns on their IPPoE cameras for failures. And their service department would test it, wouldn't find anything wrong with it, send it back, and they'd fail again. So in our testing, we found something very interesting. As camera manufacturers added what we call auxiliary functions, day, night, LED, etc. In electronics, anytime you start something, it requires more power than to maintain it. It's called the surge factor. It's normal. This is physics. And we found out that the surge factor averaged in cameras about 20%. And in the IEEE PoE standard, whenever the connected device, the camera, let's say, exceeds the power level provided by the source, it says, I have a short and I'm going to shut down. So here was a typical situation. An installer would go out, let's say it's a convenience store, and install an 8-camera IPPoE system. Everything's fine. Next day, the owner comes in, 2 cameras are offline. Immediately, they think, oh, that camera manufacturer, what a bunch of garbage. I'm going to send it back for repair. No, what happened overnight is that those 2 cameras exceeded the amount of power that the source could provide, because that wasn't taken into account in the original design. And then that cycle starts all over again. Think about how much profit is lost. The dealer had to go out, pick up the cameras, send it in for service, only to find out nothing is wrong, and then go back and reinstall it. So we created a bunch of mid-spans, power sources, PSEs as they're defined in the standard, that address this need to provide surge factors. From there, we went on and developed unmanaged, hardened, high-temperature network switches. And then we got a call from manufacturers who said, wait a minute. We're having this problem, people complaining cameras are dropping out all over the place. It's not PoE. And we discovered the bandwidth and the packet size problem. In other words, the amount of, again, I don't want to get super technical, but standard types of network switches have a restriction starting with their port about the packet size, the video frame, whatever you want to call it, it can handle. And cameras were growing to such an extent with higher resolution, they were exceeding this. So we decided to build network switches that addressed everything I'm talking about. We already had the hardest part done, which was PoE and the surge factor and everything else and the management of that we went into the switch business. And that's how our line has grown. Today, we're approaching over 200 products. Next slide, please. One other thing that's very important to us is credibility. We have a term that we use called lying truthful specifications. Let me see if I can express it this way in terms of an extended market. Our extenders go out 6,000 feet. At the end of that 6,000 feet, you have 1 watt and 1 megabps. They're not lying, but don't apply it to any practical application because it won't work. As an engineering company, and we are an engineering company, we are not allowed to publish any specifications without certification testing behind it. And you can see examples there. Let's talk about temperature. So many people talk about their products operating in high temperature. Well, there's a test you can do that's controlled actually by our transportation environment called Nema Testing. It's a 72-hour test in a heat chamber where it rotates. You know how many other manufacturers do it? They take the highest operating temperature of a single component and they say, oh, that's the highest operating temperature. When in reality, when you make a whole product, it's nothing near there. We don't do that. Somebody puts it out in the field and it fails, well, that's their problem. We don't have that attitude. So our testing is to standards. Next slide, please. And we try to show in our literature what those standards are. So we never make claims in terms of specifications that exceed the practical operating and environmental standards that apply in our industry. Next slide. So again, what are the benefits of interoperational testing? We get to see all of these products in different environments, and the challenge is to create reliable network solutions that work in that environment. There are two axioms when it comes to networking. One, it's all physics. You know, you can look at a camera and you can say, I like that picture. And the next person over can say, yeah, I don't really like that picture. Or you can look at a GUI or operation of a VMS system and say, oh, that's easy to operate. No, it isn't. You know, whatever. Networking is all physics. It's black and white. It works or it doesn't work, period. That is the key behind what we do. The other thing, the other axiom is there's no cookie cutter approaches. Every single system that you have out there, every single requirement you run into is different, depending on the cable, depending on the type of camera, depending on your VMS, everything down the line, it's unique. You cannot take one solution and apply it to another. And those are two very important things to take into consideration. Next slide, please. So what are some of the advantages? Vigitron is the only manufacturer that produces every single type of product within a network environment. And we don't just produce it as one model. Every category you see there has multiple products behind it. So what is the advantage? Well, quite often, one of the biggest drawbacks to profitability is called finger pointing. You get products in a network composition from different manufacturers. Something goes wrong. You call one manufacturer. Not my fault, call them. Back and forth and back and forth. You never get a solution. This is one solution, one manufacturer to go through, or one throat to choke. The other thing is, because we have so many products, we never restrict you to just one product. And when we work with you, we may make 2, 3, 4 proposals and tell you what those differences are. So you always have a choice. So working with us, you reduce finger pointing, you get more choices. Next slide, please. I can't stress education enough. And since we started our IPPOE division, we have had constant training seminars. Again, we do not push product. We push the unique differences in creating networks for our environment as opposed to data networks. At the start of the pandemic, we decided to increase that. We normally have about 4 of them. And we conducted a series of 8 sort of foundation classes of about a half an hour each. We had 7,500 people. So we recorded them and we posted them on our YouTube channel. Since that time, and because of all the dramatic changes in 2021 and this year, 2022, we've had updates to deal with, again, the increase in bandwidth, packet losses, and again, 802.3 BT. And we invite you, if you want to contact us, get on our mailing list. We'll always send you an invitation, excuse me, as to when we're having another seminar. But the purpose of these are educational, not product pushing. So again, if you want to start off with the basics, you can go to our YouTube channel at any time and look at any of these. Next slide, please. Again, can't emphasize enough the importance of dealing with a provider that provides everything. Next slide. What about our materials? Well, we have a product catalog, and sometimes it's difficult to keep up with as many products. We come out with about 15 to 20 new products a year. But you can download from our website our IP product guide. And our IP product guide, I believe, is a more valuable asset than even our catalog. Number one, it's more up to date, but it defines all of our products in terms of application. So if you're looking for a specific application, you go right to the IP product guide and you can see the product offerings there, or look it up on our website. Next slide, please. I didn't want to get in too depth in products, but our products are divided into about 20% of it is what we call distributor-based products. And that was really defined by ADI for us as products that essentially are lower cost or used in common day types of applications. And 80% is more project-based. But some of the products that we talk about are particularly valuable and sell in the tens of thousands. For example, that little red object you see in the upper left-hand corner of your screen is a single port surge protector. Very, very unique. It can plug into any individual port of a switch or the back of a camera or both, let's say in high lightning areas such as the Southeast. And it's inexpensive, highly protective. It's 8 kV contact to ground, 15 kV in free space. And again, it's kind of a popcorn product. So this slide, without going into depth about tons of everything that we have, shows a rendering of our distribution products, from PoE compatible power supplies to what we call our mini switch series, to test equipment, to SFPs, etc. Next slide, please. Again, I want to emphasize the 2 of our most popular products, which again is the surge protector. And then we created this little unique, what we call combiner. It allows the transmission of 2 PoE connected devices on a single line. Installer goes out, he's in a difficult situation. They want to add a camera, they want to add a light, they want to add some access control pad, but they can't run another cable. We're talking somewhere in the range of $40 or less. Again, we don't quote prices, but that's how inexpensive it is compared to the labor that would have to go in, and in some cases, the impossibility of running another cable. So these two, from a volume standpoint, again, we're talking tens of thousands. Next slide, please. Again, we have a whole series of repeaters, hardened switches. Again, I hate getting into product, but this just shows you the breadth of our line. Next slide. Test equipment. We have a whole bunch of test equipment that can save you hours of frustration when it comes to troubleshooting, assessing a network to see if it's capable of running the products that you have. Too many times you go out and make an assumption, and it's the network or the existing wire that it doesn't have the capacity of running it. So from PoE meters, next slide, please, to this little device. Now, I've been talking about 802.3 and its incompatibility and the number of wires. This little device, again, dealer cost of around $30. Plug it in at the end of the cable, it'll tell you exactly what your cable is capable of handling and exactly what your existing power source is. Next slide, please. Okay. How much power is at the end of the cable? We talked about type. What about knowing type and power? This little meter goes in at the end of the cable too, and it will tell you how much power you have. So again, we focus too much on the source of the power and never what is the resulting power in actual practical applications. And this meter will tell you, oh, you know what? I don't have enough power to run my camera. So it's not the camera's fault. I just don't have enough power. Think about testing out power lines and everything and how much time that will save in terms of your installation. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, low code, easy. So together, these two products, and I'm just using this as an example, are, under $200. Think about the amount of troubleshooting time for existing systems or the amount of time you would save in assessing a network or what's available prior to installation to determine what those problems are and solve them. It's a big savings. Next slide, please. Again, these are examples, et cetera, just to show you the breadth of the power of what we have in terms of metering and test equipment. Next slide, please. SFPs, we have a full line of SFPs. Again, the conversion in larger systems to fiber is enormous. More and more and more, we're getting requests for fiber transmission. We have a full line of SFPs to help you. And again, not only product, but to help you ascertain which SFPs you need. SFPs are unique in that they don't have standards. There's only one standard, and that's called the MSA, Multiple Source Agreement, which allows you to take an SFP and plug it into the port of a switch. Other than that, there ain't no standard. So we assist people all the time in the integration of the correct SFP and how to integrate it. Next slide. We have a full line. These are more project-based. Again, pardon me, network switches, industrial network switches, tabletop network switches. These are not your common network switches. We have full classes on problems that they solve as far as packet handling, bandwidth, PoE, checking, monitoring each port to keep PoE up and to reinstate it if it drops down to prevent service calls and loss of operating time. So again, the unique differences between the design and the requirements of products for our world, our security world, especially when it comes to PoE cameras, as opposed to standard networks. Next slide. So how does this apply to DW products? Well, okay, let's look at just two examples. These are basically multi-sensored cameras. So when we look at the DWC PZ21M96T, you'll notice that it's a 21 megapixel camera. So immediately, if we want to realize that higher resolution, we're going to be dealing with high packet sizes, okay? That's number one. Number two, in order to transmit that, it's got a 1G port. So what are our answers in our products? Well, the 1G port, if we're using them, is going to require, and depending on how much we're using them, a 10G uplink. Another important factor is we've been talking, and again, we could go into hours on this. We've been talking about handling packet size and the restrictions that are involved in standard data networks. Well, once that port takes that input signal, it combines it with all the others. Let's say it's a 24 port switch. The ability to send that to an uplink is based on the internal bandwidth called the switch fabric. And we calculated long ago that that switch fabric must be 2 times the sum of the highest bandwidth of all the individual ports. Think of it as a highway. You're going down the highway at 75 miles an hour, and all of a sudden more cars come on, and you start slowing down. Now, especially if you're in Los Angeles, you get into a traffic jam. You're stopped. And the exit you got to get off on is about a mile away, but you can't get off. That's very synonymous to how a network switch works within a network. The VMS system calls for the camera. But if that highway doesn't have enough bandwidth to let that signal to the off-ramp, you don't see it. Hence, I lost my camera, or I lose my camera intermittently. So all of our products, our switch products, are designed to maintain that high jumbo frame packet size when it enters the port and the transmission on the switch fabric. And then, of course, the highest possible PoE. And that leads us to the next camera, who, like the first camera, has all the attributes, but it's 802.3 BT. Oh, okay, let's see. The camera requires 60-watt source. And as I said before, I have a 60-watt source, but why isn't it working? Because my 60-watt source is Upoe and my camera is BT, and they ain't gonna talk to each other. We have the solutions for that. So by knowing the DW line, we're able to assist you in creating the most reliable bill of materials for that application and preventing you from discovering these problems when you're installing. Next slide, please. So again, hopefully you're going to see this before or get a copy of this, but so I'm not going to read everything, but these are all of the ways and all of the things we take into account in our product line that address the specific needs of specific DW types of cameras, so that you're sure of getting a network construction that's compatible with your individual needs. Whether it's pixel count, uplink, or network transmission, and compatible PoE. Next slide, please. So we talk about integration. Well, we have software products too, but our software products focus on health monitoring. Okay, what is the health of the network? How do we check it out? We have software products that service people can use to assess the viability of a network or to troubleshoot a network. And they're all Windows-based. So they can be operated along with DW Spectrum software by just minimizing it and calling for those alerts. Again, we have classes on it, so I don't want to go into details, but they are fully compatible with DW software, and they can help monitor. Our network monitoring monitors up to 270,000 IP addresses. Our troubleshooting and service is a great tool, again, to save you profitability or speed up and locate the problems within a network. Next slide, please. Our most important product isn't a product at all. It's our design center service. We have a team of engineers, and I'm proud to say that I'm part of it, called the design center team. And if you call us up and give us the parameters of what your requirement is, such as what cameras are you using? What cable are you using? I mean, difficult questions. We will design for you a bill of materials, and because of the scope of our products, many times more than one bill of materials, for a reliable solution. That service is free. That service has no obligation, period. There's no secret society you have to join. There's no password. You go to support@vigitron.com and somebody will contact you and work with your group to get you those bill of materials. I can't tell you throughout the 12 years that we've had this, the scope of the systems we've worked on, the headaches we've saved for dealers, et cetera, throughout the world in applying this service. And why can we do it? Because we have the database. We know the manufacturers that we've worked with. We know what their equipment needs. We know their unique qualifications. That's the key to it. So it blends right into our interoperative testing when we design products. Next slide. So how do I go? Well, how do I request design center service? You can go through our website, but the easiest way is just to send an email to support@vigitron.com and say, I need to have somebody call me. I need help in designing a system, and somebody will contact you and work with you. Simple. Like I said, nothing else is required. And hopefully, as a result of it, you'll use Vigitron product. Maybe you won't. There's still no obligation. But I consider this to be our single most valuable product. And hopefully, as part of this, I've demonstrated why we can do this and why others can't, because we offer everything in multiple forms, because we study the industry and we design our product based on our interface with all these manufacturers. Next slide, please. Okay, what is a design center? So let's say you don't want to talk to us. Then I urge you to look at this slide in detail, because just making an assumption about one aspect of a network is going to get you in trouble. This slide sort of defines the things that we use and the questions we ask when we're using a design center, when we're designing something. Cameras, who's the manufacturer model number? The number of cameras routed to a single network. Is it an IDF to MDF configuration? The type of cabling used, the cable length, the PoE source. At least ask yourself these questions, because if you're entering a system without, you're going to get into trouble, especially, as I said, these systems grow more and more complicated each day. Next slide, please. Okay, so do we abandon you during the sale? No. You know, as good as you can be in estimating, you get out there and that cable was just a little bit longer than you thought. Or maybe there's a splice in it. Or maybe it's not what you were told. We don't abandon you. We handle field technical calls day in and day out. And once we know what has changed, we're there to help to prescribe the changes that's needed. So we're there for you before the sale and during the sale, during the installation. Next slide, please. Warranty. Believe it or not, a warranty tells a lot about a manufacturer. It tells you about their confidence in the product. Vigitron has the industry's longest warranty, production lifetime. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means, especially if I'm not the original equipment manufacturer and I buy a product and 2 weeks later it goes out of production, my warranty was 2 weeks. We don't do that. Our warranty is production lifetime plus 3 years. So even if a product goes out of production, you still are guaranteed a 3-year warranty. We have product, I'll talk about the IPPOE venue, that was installed 12 years ago. Guess what? It's still in production and it's still in warranty. 12 years ago, still in production and still covered by a full warranty. So we're with you before the sale, during the installation, and after the sale. Next slide, please. There you go. Lifetime warranty plus 3 years. I consider these aspects to be even more important than the product itself because the product has to be reliable. I mean, if it's not reliable, there's no sense in even talking to you. Next slide. Okay, there we go. Like I said before, we're more than just product. We're there to protect your profitability. We're there to protect your reputation because it's our reputation. Next slide. Okay, so what we ask you to do is, when you're selecting product for your network, consider the following. From a company standpoint, the years in business, what's their primary focus? We're only dedicated to this aspect, to networking. Location, San Diego, California. By the way, we own our own building in San Diego. For those of you who know California real estate, it's a bit of a miracle. It's over 12,000 square feet. It's a standalone building. I'm very proud. We own it. It's ours. We're a company with no debt. Look at our technical support. Look at our documentation. Look at our warranty. From a product standpoint, how is it developed? What's its credibility? What's its relationship with other manufacturers? Do they refer to you? Do they depend on you? And how broad is the product line scope? Vigitron's the most reliable solution for reducing the potential for system downtime and costly service calls. Translated, that means maintaining profitability and happy customers. Next slide. Okay, go to our website, please. We have, aside from the catalog and the IP product guide, we have lots of application notes. Again, our application notes are educational. They're not product pushing. So if you want to learn something, if you want to go into more depth about any of the things that we've been discussing and you want to reference, you can download it from our website. Next slide, please. Those are the application notes that we have. When we talk about network switching, when we talk about this, we're not just talking about our product. We're talking about the things that you have to take into consideration when you're purchasing a network switch, especially for IPPOE cameras. And again, our seminars on YouTube. Next slide. Okay, contact. I put my number and my contact information. Normally, pre-COVID, it was hard to get a hold of me. I was any place in the world living on airplanes, but things have changed dramatically. So used to spend January in the Middle East. Maybe I will this time or at our offices in Zurich. But I'm pretty much bound now. So if you want to contact me directly, it's nheller@vigitron.com. Like I say, I do also participate as a member of the design center team, but I'm not the only person. And I'm also not the only person that handles technical calls. That's my phone number. And if you want, you can also sign up to be on our mailing list to receive contacts about our seminars and other educational materials. And with that, again,